Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Hunting season is right around the corner, and it gives me nostalgia about all the times all the other hunters in my family would sit around and shoot the shit. Lay them on me, /K/. The only one I got is when we hit a cougar on a country highway to where we were staying in Jackson County, Wisconsin, north of La Crosse if you aren't familiar with the state. And we called the Department of Energy and Natural Resources back in 2009. Old friend confirmed. Anyway, they dismissed us and said not to prank call them. Then we mentioned it had a radio collar. The guy on the phone asked where we were, and not 15 minutes later, they collected the cat after checking it for bullet wounds and left without so much as a hello. Why they were so adamant to deny and hide this, when it's now common knowledge, is beyond me. They've done that the past few years with bears and wolves. My guess is they're bringing these predators in for the deer population control and probably trying to turn Wisconsin into a Midwest equivalent of Montana to attract big game hunters.
It sounds like they just thought it was unlikely that you hit one, not that this was some super secret project they were trying to hide.
Not him, but my local Department of Natural Resources denied the fact that we had MT lions in our area until my neighbor's donkey killed one. I've seen 3 in the past 15 years since I've lived here. Lately, one was last year when I scared one off its recent kill. I don't know which one of us was spooked more.
Old story from my first big hunt. Be me at 18. Go hunt for moose in a bear country. Big organized hunt, so lots of hunters have to meet up and get assigned to their spots before sunrise. Get assigned spot, no idea where to go, just told to follow a trail of colored plastic tape hanging from the trees at 100-yard intervals. Sneaking out to my spot, barely above freezing temps, raining, borderline storm with very harsh winds, pitch black outside, and I forgot my flashlight, get paranoid that I'll accidentally sneak up on a bear, startle it, and get mauled, load the rifle before I'm supposed to, and flip off the safety. No idea if I'm heading in the right direction. Suddenly, something violently explodes out of a bush 2 inches into my side, runs right at me before I can even realize what's going on. Thing flops into me and fuck off just as quickly as it appeared. Almost ND in a random direction. Almost died of a heart attack. Recover from death by sheer force of will. Realize it was just a big bird that got spooked. Continue to my spot a few 100 yards ahead. Sit in a blind in the rain and cold for 6 hours trying to bring my heart rate down from 220 BPM. Lose all sensation in my hands and feet in the first hour. Shiver violently. Have to bite down to stop my teeth from rattling. I genuinely think I'm on the brink of dangerous hypothermia. See hardly any animals all day, just some crows, squirrels, and a woodpecker. Huntmaster calls of the hunt. Unload the rifle and walk back to the meeting spot. Everyone else had just as shitty of a hunt as me. Great start to my hunting career. It did, however, teach me that I was ill-equipped to handle the weather and that I needed much warmer clothes.
This happened to me when I was in college a long time ago. Still the weirdest thing to happen to me by far. Driving from University of Oregon in Eugene back home to Boise for fall break. Get started late. By the time I hit Central Oregon, it's dark. For those not familiar with the area, once you get east of the Cascades, it starts to get real isolated real quick. Driving on a 2-lane highway through the dark when I hit something in the road. Probably some shit that fell off someone's truck. Engine starts making weird noises and check engine light comes on. Start looking for a place to pull off and try to find a mechanic. Pull onto this farm to Market Road. Drive about a mile and see a farm supply store with the lights still on. A couple of locals sitting outside, drinking and smoking. I get out and try to introduce myself, but they're acting bizarre. Start losing their shit over how nice my car is and how they never see anything like it out there. My car is some rusted piece of shit imported from God knows where. Next, they start talking about how amazing my shoes are. My broke ass literally bought these shoes from some tweaker in downtown Portland after my old ones gave out. Creeped out by these guys, decided to go inside. kind-looking old dude at the counter. When he sees me walk in, he starts ranting incomprehensibly about some numbers that grow in the soil. WTF is this place? Look around the shop. A pretty typical-looking country store. Look in one of the seed bins. It's filled with gummy bears. All right, screw this. Rush out of there, decide to take my chances with the car. I've driven down that road multiple times since, but I've never been able to find that weird gummy bear store again. I try not to think about it.
Honestly, there's only two logical, non-paranormal explanations. Those were tweakers who put some hallucinogens in the gummies. Then you so happened to come along while they were tripping balls and they moved along. You huffed some shit from your busted engine by accident and just harassed some randoms.
I got a triple kill on a trio of greenhead mallards at the end of duck season. On the afternoon of the third to last day of our duck season, I was alone in our duck blind except for one of my hunting buddies' father. We quickly figured that calling only softly and letting the ducks work in on their own was the only way we were going to get these spooked, late-season survivors to work their way in. Eventually, we had a group of 5 mallards working in, descending slowly but gradually with each pass. Finally, they cupped up and began falling into the decoys, but instead of falling towards the gap in the middle of the decoys in front of us, they fluttered down off my corner on the right side of the blind. "I can't shoot that way. You get them," the old-timer whispered my way. When the group had descended to about eye level, I pushed up through the oak brush and shouldered my Browning A5. The ducks saw me and began furiously flapping their wings to climb out of the hole. As the fiber optic bead at the end of my barrel settled on the hen in the middle, I realized how many green heads there were. I switched targets to the drake immediately to her right, put the bead on his beak, and pulled the trigger. The 3-inch number 2 steel payload folded him, and he fell into the water without another movement. From below my aim, another drake was rising rapidly. I put the bead on his head and quickly fired the second shell, and once again the drake fell out of the group. At the far end of the decoy spread, the last drake had picked up both speed and altitude as he rose, and had started curving to the left. I knew he was pretty far, but I had to load a 3/2-inch BB shell for my third shot. Due to the range, I led him with a slight gap between my bead and the front of his beak. I squeezed the trigger for the final time that afternoon, and the third drake fell, unmoving. 10 seconds is all it took to go from an unmemorable hunt to one I will cherish forever.
Tyanon here got an incident that stuck with me from ROTC. Still think about it from time to time. Final year of ROTC back in 2014. Do this 5-day camp thing we all go through at Khao Chon Gai. Spoopy place with some bloody history, apparently. Third day, we get infiltration evasion training. Instructors picked a moonless night because fuck us, that's why. Dense woods and shrubbery. So dark I can't see shit. Supposed to make our way to a location marked by a lit-up signal tower. 160 of us split into roughly 11-man groups. Those that get caught take the night shift. I got picked to lead 10 other dudes because my name was at the bottom of the previous list, so they just started the next one with me. Blindly stumble our way through the dark in a line holding onto the man in front of you by the shoulder. Unsubtly crawl our way across a road where an instructor was standing nearby with a flashlight. He probably just let us go, seeing how pathetic it was. Do a head count every 15-ish minutes to make sure no one got lost in the jungle. We do this by each guy calling out his number. During one of these counts, there was a 12th man. It goes dead silent. Internally panic. Do it again, still 12. The guy at the end of the line starts hyperventilating. Says there's no one behind him, swearing up and down the line. One dude starts making a run for it. Almost lose all cohesion and scatter, saved by a couple of the calmer guys pulling them by the scruff of the neck. The guy behind me tells me to keep moving and don't do another head count. But what if someone does get lost? Screw him, he says. He still wants to pretend ghosts aren't real, and he can't do that if something is actually messing with us. Blaze through the woods at breakneck speed. One of the instructors caught us. We weren't even trying to sneak at that point. I got sent to the medical tent because of some pretty bad scrapes as we were rushing through the woods. No night sentry duty for me. That next morning, we got called in to get chewed out and laughed at for how badly we screwed up. The 10 other dudes looked like shit, little sleep and pale faces. Said they couldn't sleep even after the sentry duties were over. Explained ourselves, instructors simply nod and tell us to not talk or think about it too much while still in the camp.
I've only really got one spooky story that can't be explained. Be hog hunting with a group of buddies on of their properties. The feeder set up in an L-shaped field, so we split up into 2 groups of 3 each with 2 night vision devices and go to different legs of the L. 5 hours go by with nothing showing up. Don't even hear coyotes that are typically out that time of year. But both groups keep hearing something moving in the tree line behind them. Finally decide to call it a night and go back to camp to get drunk and mag dump trash. Head back along a gravel path with open land on either side for at least 400 feet. The whole group is talking and making a lot of noise. Suddenly, a dark mass about 3 feet tall and 5 feet long bolts across the path about 10 feet in front of us without making any noise. Without anyone saying anything, all 6 of us immediately stop talking, go guns up, lights on, and start searching for whatever that was. Never find it. It made no sound, left no tracks, and no one saw it until it was right in front of us. My best guess is that it was a cougar, but it's really weird that it got that close to us if it was.
Before I moved to the US, have an encounter I never really shared with anyone. My brother and I walked the few miles along rural lanes to a relatively secluded beach in Glamorgan, Wales, that's only accessible on foot through a forest or along the cliffside from either direction to chill and drink beer. The forest houses an old folly in a clearing which is creepy in itself if you weren't aware of its existence, and the immediate area has a lifeguard weathering monitoring station that's largely unmanned throughout the year, an abandoned summer camp that's been left to rot. There's overgrown and disheveled World War II pillbox positions you can still find, and the entire area was once an Iron Age promontory fort, with the defensive mounds still present in the forest. The county is steeped in history from all ages of Britain and is one of the most haunted in Britain, so it's got its fair share of tales of things going bump into the night, but I digress. Sat chilling with my bro, sipping Stella and shooting the shit on what is a mostly rocky beach illuminated by a power station to the far east of the bay, I decided to go stretch my legs and walk west. There's nothing between the beach we're at until you hit the more popular beach of the rural town a few miles along, itself once the site of a Roman harbour. It was pitch black and hard progress because of all the rocks with a lot of cliff fall from the limestone cliffs that populate this coastline. This coastline is also famous for wreckers because of how dangerous the Bristol Channel can be along this particular stretch. While walking along, it seemed to get darker and darker ahead of me, to the point it was pitch black, and I could barely see anything at all without a flashlight. I got the most overwhelming sense of spine-prickling unease and danger I've ever felt, and I'm not the kind to ignore instinct, so I turn and head back to where I left my brother, all the while keeping a glance over my shoulder. When I had my brother in sight, he's hopping up and down and gesticulating wildly at me, but I can't hear him over the roar of the waves until I get closer. He's shouting and exclaiming, real concerned. "Did you see that? Are you okay?" I ask him what he's on about, and he describes thusly. "I thought someone was throwing a flare at you off the cliff. There was an orb of light headed towards you, but it wasn't giving off any light like a flare would, and was so slow, so I was confused. It sort of dripped light behind it like a liquid." I didn't see anything of the sort like this, and we were never pranksters to each growing up, and certainly not in our late teens and early 20s as we were. I told him I felt dread at one point walking, and we decided to leave pretty darn quickly. Our route home is through the forest because that's the only way that takes you to the lanes we needed to walk back to, but there's maintained paths through it, so it's an easy walk. Making our way along, flashlight on and a little spooked, we hear this sudden shriek. A woman's shriek. We have foxes, And it was not that kind of cry. And there are no wild cats that make those horrific woman in distress sounds like in the US. I turn my flashlight off while me and my brother are staring at each other and trying to figure out where it's coming from. It's a constant, consistent woman's scream, like someone playing the same soundbite over and over every 3 seconds. We realize that shrieking is coming up the path we just took from the beach and is getting closer and closer to us real quick. We sprinted like hell out of those woods and up the lanes away from the area until we were closer to home. I was ahead and my brother behind because he's not as fit as I am, but I'm keeping pace for him. But he said he saw a sickly light moving back into the forest when we got onto the road proper. We didn't really talk about it after that. Just chalked it off as one of those odd experiences you get when living in a place like this. Ghost sightings and supernatural occurrences are more common in Glamorgan than people want to admit. But while looking the area up, I happened upon an article that was dated a few weeks prior to the date we were on that beach about a rather popular local TV presenter's self-termination at the same cliff point I stopped and turned back from after sensing that dread. Years later, while reading up on local folklore, I come across something called the Kiowareth. Kiowareth, often referred to as the Sihireth, emerges as one of the most captivating death omens in Welsh folklore. The creature's mournful moaning, usually heard from a distance, carries a sense of impending doom. The sound of the Kiowareth resonating along a street is believed to signify multiple impending deaths, while its presence near the sea warns of a fatal shipwreck. Encounter with the Kiowareth is described as terrifying, as it appears as a male or female figure with disheveled hair, pointed black teeth, withered arms, and a bone-chilling shriek. Death typically follows in its wake, often claiming a close friend or family member rather than the witness themselves.
Thanks for sharing, Anon. That was fun to read.
Well, thank you. The area in question is called Summerhouse Bay to the locals. The Folly was an old summer house built by a Norman family who ruled that particular area. Many of them held the border areas of England and Wales, and their castles are still in various states of ruin or were built upon by successive medieval dynasties. The death was an HTV presenter named Hugh Weeks, whose death was largely a mystery, but there were rumors of him suffering heavy depression.
I actually do this time. I'll greentext for readability. Me and 2 others late-night hog hunting on an over 1,300-acre property in rural Georgia. We have night vision goggles and ear pro boosts to hear anything and everything. Sitting together in the middle area of the property on a ridge overlooking a creek area. Woods go eerily quiet to the point where we all notice it at around the same time start hearing a wooing and howling sound coming from the ridge adjacent to us. We call out hello, ask if anyone needs help, and even shine our weapon lights a bit just to see if we get any responses. No one ever answers. We never see or hear anyone. Fast forward 2 weeks later. Same property. Different location. Me plus 2 others at night hog hunting again, but this time on the edge of a pond at the edge of a field on the same property. Minimal activity. Catch some deer on night vision goggles, an armadillo or 2. While watching the deer, they suddenly get very spooked and take off. Across the pond from us, an entire tree starts shaking violently from top to bottom. Tree makes a loud ruckus, but no cracks or woos or anything. Tree stops shaking. We make it over to investigate. The ground is torn up almost like turkey scratches around the base, and the pine tree is around 8 feet in diameter. Later that winter, same property, yet another area. Just one of us, not me, parked in a truck on the main access trail through the property, engine off, listening for any hog activity. Here's a big crash out of the passenger window, then sounds like someone dropped a bag of concrete in the bed of the truck, shaking the whole truck. Woods go silent, hops out to investigate. No sign of any fallen limbs, nothing in the bed of the truck. Called out to see if someone had wandered up in the dark. No response. I haven't been back to the property in years, but definitely some spooky shit out there. During one hunt, we saw a black panther about 10 feet up a pine tree on the edge of the largest field, so I kind of figured that's what we were hearing.
A few years ago, be me, sitting in my house alone as usual. Brother-in-law says I need to get out more, invites me to Halloween on the farm. Hang around all day, shoot some. sitting around the fire that night. It's actually nice to talk with people, notice something off, nothing specific, just a feeling. The animals are afraid. That's never good. Farm guys have put their beers down and stopped talking. Others haven't noticed. Catch one of the older guys' attention, tap my pistol, get a slight nod. Someone tells the less attentive that something has spooked the animals. Probably just another mountain lion roaming through the area. They're going to go walk around and fire off some rounds to scare it off. I should come too, see the farm at night. Grab a 4 from the truck, shove a couple mags in my pockets. Meet up with the others by the fields. Did not expect this. Shotguns loaded with slugs, 308s and 4570s. Passing out flak vests and helmets. Explanation, please. Apparently a big-ass animal had been coming around for the last few months. Moves on after it catches food, but they prefer to send a message. Hasn't attacked humans, but it's not worth the risk. Livestock isn't cheap either. No longer sure I want to go on this little adventure. Too late now. Split into groups. I'm with the group between what corn is still unharvested and the trees. At least I'm not walking through the corn. Walking with 3 other guys. Can feel it watching us from time to time. Can hear it on either side. It's going from group to group. Eventually, someone spots it. Shots from the trees. It's coming this way. It's here. Looks like a freakishly large wolf. Can't be sure. Can be sure that it's big. Runs on all 4s, covered in long, shaggy fur and moves fast. Then there's the blood. The head is covered in blood. Fuck. This. Shit. It runs past, hits the group in the corn and starts back towards us. One of the guys with me fires his shotgun. It turns and runs ahead, no longer in shock, now freaking out. Surprised I didn't shit my pants. Mag dump in its general direction as it flees. Hand on my shoulder. Stop firing, dumbass, it's already running. We go back towards the buildings. Nobody was hurt. Take the gear off, put the guns away. The blood was from a deer it had killed earlier. All that was left of it was a bloody mess. Rejoin the others. Why so much gunfire? Mountain lion was so scared by the first shot that it didn't notice that it was coming straight towards another group. When it got to us, it bolted off in the other direction. Rambo here, me, decided he wanted it on his wall and started blasting. Either that or he's as big of a wuss as it is. All good in the end, though. Nobody got hurt, and it'll stay away for a while. The topic is quickly changed. Nothing truly spooky. Just an abnormally large wolf the farmers didn't want people to know about. Still, the fact that it stayed in the area is concerning, especially since it took a few hits after it moved in. Eventually, it slipped up and someone got a good shot at it. It got disposed of, and the farmers didn't have the state poking around their properties trying to find it.
Almost shot a man once. Be me. At a public range in the woods. Zeroing an AR-10. While the range is live and I'm firing, a brass man walks in front of me from my right. Didn't see him. Fire. The muzzle blast knocks his hat off. Missed his chest by inches at most. Shoot him a pissed-off look. He has the fear of God in his eyes. Continue staring at him until he goes to sit in a corner and think about what he did. Never saw him again. I would like to mention that this range would have been damn near impossible to get to quickly. He almost certainly would have died before reaching the hospital. It's about 30 minutes of winding dirt trails that are just barely wide enough for a car. An ambulance wouldn't make it up there, and it'd take a while to drive him out.
I was hunting in the northern woods of Ashland County, Wisconsin when I was 16. It was my first time going out, and also the first time I was left alone with a gun. So, being a teenager, I was pretty excited. We woke at 5:30 a.m. and left before the sun rose above the horizon. Arriving on the trail, I walked to my ground stand alongside my brother, cousin, and father. Our stands were all aligned in a distant row, separated a few hundred feet. Located on the edge of an old logging road, the stands were easy to find. The stands ran perpendicular to the logging road, forming a straight line along the top of a hill in the dense forest. This wasn't your open field type of hunting land. This was real wilderness hunting land. My stand was the closest to the logging road, so upon our arrival, My father helped me settle in before continuing through the dark forest with my brother and cousin. I got situated and he went on his way. I watched the light of his headlamp disappear into the trees, and I waited for the sun to rise before loading my gun, as the season doesn't start until the sun comes up. Checking my watch, I saw it was about 6:15 a.m., so I had some time to kill. I decided to spend the next hour or so catching up on the sleep I missed the previous night. When I woke, it was because of a cold gust of wind that knocked snow into my lap. I jolted up and immediately checked my watch. 9:30 a.m. I overslept, and God knows how many deer I could have missed. After sulking in my stand, I felt pressure in my bladder and a need to relieve myself. I picked up my gun, chambered it, and walked backward behind my stand some 150 feet or so to make sure there would be no scent for the deer to pick up on. I opened my zipper and looked around as I did my business. In the dense tree line, I noticed 3 men in blaze orange gathered together in a triangle. They all seemed to be talking with each other. At first, I thought it might have been my brother, father, and cousin. However, this was weird, very weird. We have been the only family to hunt this land in the past 50 years. Once I finished, I picked up my gun and unloaded it before using my scope to sight out the group of people. I wasn't hallucinating. It was 3 men huddled together, guns slung on their shoulders. I made sure to take a good long look at every feature I could pick up on. One man wore a thick, fuzzy hat that was all orange. Another man sported a stereotypical lumberjack beard. The final man wore wire-frame aviators. As I paned back across the group, the man with the wire-framed glasses looked back at me through the scope. I had caught their attention, and fearing them to be game wardens, I dropped the scope from my eye. My heart rate hit the roof, and I began fumbling with the magazine I had unloaded. While scrambling to fit the magazine in the gun, I managed to drop my glove in the snow. I bent down to pick it up, and once I looked up, the men were gone. Having realized the mistake I had made by pointing my gun at what could be DNR agents, I wanted to find them to explain the situation. I continued through the dense trees and saw the spot where the men were standing. Arriving at the point, I examined the undisturbed snow. There were no footprints. My heart rate quickened, and I stopped to look around to see if I could see any orange through the brush. There was nothing around me. I was alone with the trees and snow. I abandoned my search and returned to my stand, anxiously waiting for the end of the day so I could report to my father what I had seen. Once we made it back to our cabin, I berated him with questions. We're the only people that hunt up here, right? Did you, my brother, and my cousin stay in your stands all day? Did you see anyone walking around you guys because I did? My dad thought I was lying to him, as it was nearly impossible that other people had begun to hunt on this remote land. It felt like I was in those horror movies where the main character tries telling the others of the danger, yet no one would listen. My father eventually talked me down, and I relaxed, convincing myself it was a group of new guys who were testing out the land. Before I fell asleep that night, I began to examine the pictures beside my bed. What I saw turned me as pale as the sheet that covered me. 3 men, 3 different pictures. A 4th picture with 1969 written on the back contained all 3 of them. They were posed around a giant buck that had bled out in the snow. One man wore a thick, fuzzy orange hat, the other man had a long, dark-haired beard, and the 3rd man wore wire-frame glasses. I sprung up out of my bed with the pictures and confronted my father. "Who are these guys, Dad?" I asked. "Oh, you wouldn't know them," he replied, returning his attention to the card game in front of him. "Those are the fellas that built this cabin back in '46 after the war." I felt as if I had gotten much colder after he had said that, but I pressed on. "Who's this guy?" I asked, pointing to the man with the wire-framed glasses. "Grandpa," my dad said. My grandpa had been dead for years, ever since I was 9. In fact, all of them had been dead for years. I will never forget the look my grandpa gave me through that scope. He seemed angry with me based on the way his brow was furrowed. I will never forget that day.
I remember an old story that circled around my childhood town that in the woods a crazy person was cooking human flesh. The story would always become prominent in October since adults wanted to scare kids and keep them out of wandering around at night. When I got older and returned for a summer break from college and hikes in the woods with my friends, we went off trail to drink beers when suddenly we happened upon a rotted wooden structure. It must have been abandoned for years because most of it was collapsed and overgrown. The only thought part exposed and standing was a stone chimney, and although we couldn't get a look inside, we could see just enough to see what looked like bones. Whether or not they were human, I don't know, but they were certainly large white bones with cracks as if they had been on fire.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check the Odyssey and Rumble pages for separate archives of previous broadcasts.